Right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and good evening to our virtual audience tonight. Very warm welcome to all of you. This is our quarterly webinar, and we're doing it both live. We've got a live audience over here in Cape Town. So if you ever come along to Cape Town, ensure that you come along and see us live. We are coming to a city near you in future, along with Wealth Assist. Is a series that we're running. And for those of you who don't know me, my name's Neil Peterson. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Real Estate Investor, rei.co.za. We're a real estate platform for investors, the industry, and welcome to tonight. And we look forward to your engagement. So tonight we're talking about a particularly interesting topic. We're talking about South African property rights. It's been very controversial. And on the back of that, we're also going to be talking about how you can adapt accordingly and use your property rights to your best value. So really our goal is to educate you, to uplift you, and to ensure that you become a competent investor through our team over here. From Wealth Assist, who I'm going to introduce to you very shortly. But first of all, I want to encourage you to interact with us tonight. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the scene, first of all, of our topics. And then what we would like to do is ask you, if you're online, is then in the Q&A box just on the bottom right-hand side, what you do is just drop your question in there and we will deal with it. We've actually specifically scheduled a very long session right at the end of this webinar to deal with your questions, and also to our live audience as well. I welcome the questions. We will send a microphone around to you as well. So tonight we're going to dive into the very complex issue, which it is a complex issue, of the Expropriation Act, which really affects your property rights as an owner and as an investor. It's not our first one we've done. We had very high amount of views on our last webinar and also on the follow-up. So we assume that we're going to get the same response from you tonight as well. So the big issue and the big elephant in the room is around nil compensation. And before I introduce our team and our experts, and we're going to cover all these issues. So if you've got any questions around that, this is the time to ask on that particular thing. So as you know, as investors, economic growth depends on what? On property rights. And if we don't have those property rights, then and secure ownership, then certainly that puts a lot of risk on us. So our expert panel tonight will certainly provide those insights and as much as we can into the legal changes that impact property ownership, the risks of expropriation, and how you can protect yourself as a property investor. And I think you'll leave tonight with a clearer understanding of understanding these regulations a little bit more and how it affects you as a landlord, as a homeowner, and also investors who own multiple properties. So we'll also share powerful strategies. I think that's more important, is let's look at your personal economy. Let's look at strategies for turning yourself into an income-producing machine using your assets. And that's when I'll shortly introduce our two panelists here and how we can open up more wealth-building opportunities. And I think that's the point. We want to build that personal economy of yours. We tend to get stuck in the macro, the broader view of what's happening out there, but don't forget to carry on in your smaller economy. Also explore the power of compound returns in real estate, something that can really transform your financial future. So whether you're just beginning or whether you are more seasoned investor, we're definitely going to hopefully deal with issues that will assist you today in becoming a better investor and one that gets certainly better returns. It's all about giving you tools and strategies. And so to navigate these challenges, and we always get challenges. It doesn't matter where we get economies that go up and down. We have all kind of daily challenges that we've got to deal with, and we just have to keep dealing with this on an ongoing basis. So, first of all, I'd like to introduce to the team, and starting off, I'm going to start off with on my right-hand side with Daniel. Daniel is the co-founder of the Assist Group. He's also a director of Turning Point Properties, and he's very passionate about real estate. And so please join me in welcoming Daniel. Daniel, do you want to introduce yourself quickly to the audience?
Yeah, thank you. Welcome here. I know you all will have a pleasant experience of especially listening to Chris here next to me. I'm trying to catch up on all the South African property rights because we all think we know something about it. But Chris will hopefully do us a big favor and make it easier for us to understand. And then secondly, on our side, I think just spending your time here tonight, you are investing. You're already investing time. And when Gerhard speaks about our value of yourself, your own value, then we'll understand as well how that fits into the whole picture. So I'm excited.
Absolutely. And our next guest, he's a chief investment officer here at Westhuizen. And he's also very passionate. He's got many years, 30 years, in fact, in financial planning, property investment. And he's dedicated to helping you and his clients to achieve long-term financial security. So welcome to Gerhard van der Westhuizen. Gerhard, do you want to just introduce yourself or
Thank you, Neil. Appreciate. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for being here. The local team. It is a passion of mine to see wealth creation happening. And, in life, you learn a lot. But when you need to stand up, you need the right team around you. And I really believe that when you are here and listening to us and learning from each other, you can protect yourself and that ability to create more wealth in the future. So thank you for listening to us and let us share some of the information that we've got.
Wonderful. Good having you as well, Gerhard.
Thank you.
And of course, last but not least, we've got Chris Nel, and he's director in the litigation department, BDP Attorneys. And he's going to be the main star of he's certainly going to start off the presentation with something very controversial that we all want to hear about. Specializes in litigation, commercial law, and property matters. And he brings a wealth of experience in South African courts and also manager of the conveyancing department, focusing on residential and commercial property. Welcome to you, Chris. Do you want to give yourself a...
Thank you, Neil. Much appreciated. I appreciate the kind introduction. Thank you also to Westhuizen, Daniel, Gerhard, for having me here. I look forward to giving you my insights into the Expropriation Act. These days you can't step out of the house without being confronted by someone that think, the government's going to take their property.
Yeah.
Put boots on the ground, and come and take their property by force. So it forced me as a conveyancer to actually study the act, have a look into it without all the hysteria and focus and unpack it. So hopefully I can present it in a palatable format tonight.
That's wonderful. All right. So Chris, what I'm going to do, I think this evening, we're going to get straight into the presentations. So we're going to start off with you, Chris, and right into talking about South African property rights. So I'm going to hand over to you and you can take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Okay, like I said, there's a lot of hype and hysteria regarding this topic. To such an extent, there's politicking. People are using it for political purposes. The media is creating hype, for sensational purposes, to such an extent that the President of America has even commented on our Expropriation Act. I never thought I would see that in my lifetime. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and unpack the various provisions that impact property owners and owners of real rights like mortgagees. I'm going to try and present in a palatable format without any hysteria. And then lastly, I'm going to try my best to look into the crystal ball to see where this is going to go, because I think that's what everyone is interested in. So firstly, we are privileged. We live in a democratic society with the rule of law. And the highest law in this land is the Constitution of South Africa. So that's where I started. I wanted to understand what the Constitution says about expropriation and whether or not it's lawful. So the section 25 of the Constitution explicitly deals with expropriation. And it states as follows: no one may be deprived of property except in terms of law of general application, and no law may permit arbitrary deprivation of property. Property may be expropriated only in terms of a law of general application, 3 provisos: for public purpose or in the public interest, subject to compensation, and the amount of compensation and the manner of payment must be just and equitable. And then there's to determine the amount of compensation, the Constitution gives us guidance. And to the effect that it said they will have a look at all relevant circumstances, including the current use of the property, the history of the acquisition and use of the property, the market value of the property, the extent of direct state investment and subsidy in the acquisition and beneficial capital improvement in the property, and the purpose of the expropriation. So what I take from that is that obviously the Constitution does, and the highest law in the land does allow expropriation. Expropriation is lawful, but there's certain provisos. So it cannot be used, expropriation cannot be used arbitrarily. It must be just, and it's subject to just and equitable compensation. All right. Many people are surprised to hear that expropriation is not a new concept in our law, or for that matter, various other jurisdictions throughout the world. The predecessor to the current Expropriation Act was the 1975 Expropriation Act. I want to touch on it briefly. In terms of the 1975 Expropriation Act, expropriation was lawful and allowed for public purpose. Now, public purpose were defined as includes any purposes connected with the administration of the provisions of any law by organ of state. The 2024 Act, however, expands the grounds for expropriation to include both public purpose and public interest. You've heard those phrases when I quoted from the Constitution. So the Constitution allows both. Public purpose is defined, and I think this is a good time to stand and to just have a quick look at what it is actually defined as, because a lot of what I'm going to discuss is going to turn on this point. Public purpose is defined, includes any purposes connected to the administration of any law by an organ of state, in terms of which the property concerned will be used by or for the benefit of the public. I'll delve into this a bit later. Public interest defined as include the nation's commitment to land reform and to reforms to bring about equitable access to all South Africa's natural resources in order to redress the results of past racial discriminatory laws or practices. So in essence, the key difference is the 1975 Act embraced the principle of willing buyer, willing seller. Put differently, expropriation could only occur at compensation and at a market-related amount. The 2024 Act, that gets everyone so riled up, introduces the possibility of nil compensation in specific circumstances. And as you rightly pointed out, Neil, that is the elephant in the room. So broadly speaking, the current act or the definitions of the public purpose and public interest aligns with section 25 of the Constitution, say for the last part of the sentence, which included in order to redress the results of past racial discriminatory laws or practices. I'm going to deal with nil compensation and the circumstances under which a property may be expropriated for nil compensation. But what I want to pause on is people want to know, and I get this question often, how will the state or the expropriating authority or the minister, whoever that may be, how will they determine the amount of compensation payable to me as a property owner in the event that my property is expropriated? That is dealt with in terms of Section 12. And basically tantamount that the compensation must be just and equitable, reflecting an equitable balance between the public interest, the interest of those affected, including an owner, holder of a right, a mortgagee, having regard to all the relevant circumstances, including the current use of the property, the history of the acquisition and use of the property, the market value of the property, the extent of direct state investment and subsidy in the acquisition and beneficial capital improvements on the property, and the purpose of the expropriation. Okay, so now I turn to deal with when my property be expropriated for compensation and when it may be expropriated for no compensation. So for compensation, obviously the most easy one is the public purpose. There's a factor. This is not contentious. I mean, this generally relates in most jurisdictions, and the 1975 Act made provisions for it. This is normally relates to infrastructure development, building of public hospitals, schools, train stations, power lines, whatever the case may be. A recent example that jumps to mind is the building of the Gautrain in Gauteng. A lot of property were expropriated for that, and there was fair compensation paid for those property. The public interest is the sticky point, the ground for expropriation. Like I said, not a new concept. Section 25 did provide for expropriation for public interest. So the last sentence that reads to redress the result of, or the last part of the sentence, to redress the result of past racial discriminatory laws or practices, makes it clear to me that this provision will be utilized for land reform purposes as we know it. My main gripe with this provision, it's extremely widely worded, and it consists of very general concepts. There's no limitations there too. It actually creates more questions in my mind than it gives answers. Obviously, this thing will play out, and I'll discuss that a bit later when I look into the crystal ball and attempt to do so. But what will follow in due course, and I hope this will give us more guidance, is the Minister of Public Works. I think it's Dean McPherson at this stage. He will publish regulations and guidelines in accordance with the powers vested in him by the Expropriation Act, and hopefully that will give us more clarity in that regard. But look, I fully understand the confusion and paranoia regarding the public interest component. And I do not have a clear answer. There's no magic bullet. It's going to play out. Now, let's talk about paranoia.
Yeah.
That's the null compensation. That's where friends are always confronting me at bras, and saying, "Listen, what do we do? Do we sell?
Take my flat.
You know what? And it's the most controversial aspect. In essence, it's dealt with in Section 12.3. which state that it may be just and equitable for the expropriating authority to expropriate your property in 4 circumstances. Number 1, if property is held for speculation purposes. It says where the land is not being used and the owner's main purpose is not to develop the land or use it to generate income, but to benefit from appreciation of its market value. So it's clearly speculation properties. The phrase use it or lose it comes to mind, and that makes a lot of property investors extremely nervous, and rightly so. The other factors, or the other 3 circumstances, is less controversial. 1, where organ of state holds land that it is not using for its core functions, so unutilized government land, we don't really care about that. Where owner has abandoned his right, abandoned the land and failed to exercise control over it despite being able to do so, otherwise abandoned properties. And the last one, where the market value of the land is equivalent to or less than the present value of direct state investment or subsidy, in the acquisition and beneficial capital improvement of the land. So the most controversial one, and the circumstance where people are most paranoid about and scared about, and rightly so, is obviously property for speculation purposes, property that's not used. As a lawyer, I've got several issues and concerns. I mean, obvious questions arise. Who will determine this largely speculative or subjective principle? What will happen to land, for argument's sake, that's not used or used for argument's sake as conservation, or the development of land is prohibited due to some prohibitive piece of legislation? The wording again, very broad, not sufficiently limiting as you want an act to be. You don't want people to start interpreting it, and you don't want the court to start interpreting it. Must be clear, but hopefully it will get clearer. Because you also don't want to leave too much in the minister's discretion when no compensation becomes payable, or not. So again, I'm of the opinion that the guidelines will follow, so people should just relax and see it plays out and see how it plays out. But there is certain protection for property owners. So the way the act is drafted, it's very strict and very formalistic in the processes that the expropriating authority must follow before they can expropriate authority. It goes hand in hand. So the act in essence ensures that no expropriation can occur without due process. Again, that allows the fear of a lot of people of arbitrary land grabs. Decide, look, I like the houses in Hout Bay, and I'm going to go expropriate a couple for friends and family. It's not happening that way, and the act doesn't allow it. There's certain internal mediation processes built into the act, but as far as I can understand, that relates to the reasonable compensation aspect of it. But overriding to all this is an owner has a right to approach a high court for any dispute arising out of the expropriation. Look, as a lawyer with access to courts, our courts are very robust and very independent, and I do have a lot of faith in our courts and faith in the judgments. So I believe that people will get the necessary relief should they approach the court, and should the process or any act by the government or the expropriating authority be inconsistent with the law, they will get relief. Obviously, the obvious question begs is that the High Court especially is not always accessible to people and cost-wise. I mean, not everyone has the financial means to approach the court. I don't have an answer to that. It's safe to say that, look, I think there's a lot of firms, law firms, that will want to make a name for themselves. Should the first act of expropriation happen, that will jump on this to set precedent and get their name out there. So, and pro bono organizations, I think, will be very keen to get involved. I also get some questions regarding because people are scared about investing and how will that look, and how will it change this landscape of property in South Africa, and more specifically, what about the rights of mortgagees? So the Expropriation Act specifically recognizes the rights of mortgagees, and they protected under the Act in a couple of manners. Most importantly, one, property that's encumbered by mortgage bond cannot be expropriated without compensation, for nil compensation, first and foremost. Secondly, should expropriation happen with regards to the property that's encumbered under the mortgage bond, the compensation is payable to the mortgagee in terms of Section 16 of the Act. And also, the Act stipulates, it is important, the Act also stipulates that the payment must be just and equitable. What's just and equitable in the circumstances? I would venture to say that unless my bond is settled in full, the mortgage loan is settled in full, it can never be just and equitable. And I mean, the knock-on effect, if that is not the case, would be immense. I mean, banks will be loath to invest in property and grant mortgage finance. So obviously the mortgagees also have the internal mediation processes available to them. And I think the mortgagees in general will have better access to courts than probably the government. So for now.
Can I, sorry,
yes,
just use an example here. So what you're saying is, for argument's sake, if our investor concluded a transaction and he is the first mortgage bond holder, he'll have the similar rights, obviously, as a bank or any other part.
Yes, absolutely. Rights of mortgages. They don't differentiate between financial institutions, private individuals, etc. Okay. So now it's time to look into the crystal ball, to attempt to see where this is going. So firstly, I think we can all agree that that constitutional challenges is going to follow. I mean, that's clear. Even for posturing purposes or whatever the case may be, or for real concerns. I mean, AfriForum springs to mind, civil organizations, there's been political parties that indicate that they're going to approach the court. So there's going to be constitutional challenges. We touch on the pro bono firms. I think the law firms in general is going to stand in line to offer their services to affected parties. My opinion is that the null compensation provision is unlikely to survive scrutiny by the Constitutional Court. I cannot see. I tried to unpack it as simple as possible. I quoted certain of the sections. The Constitution does not allow it, and does not. So I don't think null compensation, in actual fact, that it doesn't not allow it. It prohibits it. The Constitution provides that you have to be paid compensation. It must be just and equitable. So I don't think that is going to withstand scrutiny, and that is obviously the main gripe everyone has, is that the government or the expropriation authority or the minister can come and they can arbitrarily take the property away. That's not happening, and I don't think it's going to withstand public scrutiny. I hope this clip is not saved somewhere and I'm proven wrong, and it doesn't age.
It is saved, and recorded.
So this one has to be destroyed or at least edited out because it might age very badly. But I am of the opinion that it won't survive. So another thing that gives me a bit of comfort is so the power to expropriate vests in the Minister of Public Work. Currently is Dean Westhuizen. So he's been publicly opposed to the act, and in the media, publicly he's been opposed to the act. I found an article in preparation for tonight. I found an article where he publicly stated, as the minister responsible for this bill, and I think that's the most recent article, I am also committed to ensuring that it is constitutional and there will be no arbitrary land grabs by the state in South Africa. Property rights are not only about protecting investments, but also about ensuring that the rule of law is upheld in all sectors of society. Now, again, cabinets change, so that's obviously what someone's going to argue. Cabinets change, and the next guy might not be or share the same sentiments, but that does give me comfort. I mean, the public utterances by the current Minister of Public Works that there's going to be no arbitrary land grabs. Lastly, another factor to consider, obviously, is property taxes. I mean, that's one of the major key components of our GDP. Property taxes contributes a lot to the fiscus. I looked at some stats. I couldn't find the most recent financial year stats. But to put this in perspective, in the 2017-2018 financial years, SARS collected 16.5 billion in taxes on property. Now, that's not a small amount by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, of that, the estate duty and transfer duties are the major contributions. So, you know, if you follow the logic, if you look at it this way, from a purely economic sense, it would most definitely not be in the interest of the government of South Africa, whoever they may be, to try and curtail the property sector. I mean, because it's such a major part of revenue. I mean, they're going to lose on the property taxes severely. So, look, I'm an internal optimist. I must be honest. I also do feel that the act, we're not always given a fair shake by the media. I think people jumped on the bandwagon and
Sensation.
It's a sensation thing, and then there was various other parties that got involved, and social media got involved, and it got very convoluted very fast. And like I said, not a lot of people knew there was an expropriation, or governments could expropriate property prior to this. So the issues, according to me, is not that large. And again, as a lawyer, I place my faith in the courts, and I place my faith in the hands of the Constitutional Court to give us guidance and sort this out. Our property rights are entrenched in the Constitution, and I don't think that this act will severely affect it or curtail it.
Great. I think that's
Great
a great
job.
way of setting the scene. And
Well done, Chris.
so thank you, Chris. And you know, I think it was just recently President Cyril Ramaphosa actually mentioned in city of Johannesburg a lot of hijacked buildings, and he said he would like to exercise the rights of no compensation on some of those buildings that have been hijacked.
Yes.
So I don't want to go, but essentially, I think it's at some time it will be tested in the courts,
yes.
and I think from there that would be kind of the way forward. So I just want to say to our audience out there, and also to our audience here, if you've got any questions, please pop them into the Q&A box. We will deal with them at the end of the webinar in the last section, which we've kept aside specifically for you. We've kept it. Donald Trump, if you're watching, you can also send us a question as well, and we can also educate you a little bit just on the Expropriation Act as well. So next up, I would like to hand over to Gerhard, and I really like the topic of this conversation because there's so many things which is happening in the macro environment. And we tend to allow bad news, good news, bad news, all this kind of news to affect us on a day-to-day basis, which we should not, because we mustn't forget about our micro view and our micro economy, what we do on a day-to-day basis. So I'm going to hand over to Gerhard to take it forward from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Yes, so I was thinking one of the aspects that Chris touched on was actually the economy. And I remember in the years gone, 2008, for those who were there, with the high interest rates kicking in, and the whole discussion of what the impact is of the property market dipping. So a share market falling is one aspect, but a property market dipping, the extent and the impact, the negative impact of this sector. So when I saw on your slides that the banks could be involved in the legal action, I'm actually very, feeling much better now, because I know that they will protect their assets. That's for sure. So I was
And yours, who's got mortgages.
yes. So I always say the banks are the best partners. Just play along. But in this case, I think they're going to be playing along with us if our properties are one of those attached. So all right. So my thinking was speaking about the economy, and I was actually walking with my daughter, and this topic came to mind. She's now fourth year. Articles, studying to be in the financial world, management accountant. And, in that phase in life where you want to, so how do I start where will I end up? And how do I get there? So I thought, okay, let's look at this concept, personal economy management. Now, not many people think about themselves as an economy, but trust me, you are. And if we can maybe start off by looking at the definition, economy is defined as the state of a country in terms of the production of goods and services, the consumption of goods and services, and the supply of money. So production, consumption, and supply. And then I thought to myself, okay, so if I convert this into my personal economy, it will look something like this. My production can be interpreted as part of my salary or income. Doesn't matter where it's coming from. I'm producing something and someone is actually willing to pay something for me, working for them or selling them something. So that's the production side. The consumption side, your expenses can be, divided into three aspects. You are spending money for stuff that you bought in the past. Anyone identifying that? 72 months motor vehicle finance deals. So something in the past, and I'm still paying. Something in the present, cash. That bargain, that sale, I need to get there. And then something in the future, and that is mostly investment. So if you go to, that pillar is then consumption. And then the last pillar is supply of money or capital. So what I realized is that cash or assets and capital in nature, the assets being capital in nature is the key. So the result is I have an income stream. I'm spending money in different ways, and I end up with, hopefully, in the future, my supply. And my supply should be coming in the form of cash or assets. Someone said cash and land. And that's where I suddenly realized the source of all income comes from an asset base that is capital in nature. So if you think about personal wealth, you must do something that creates assets that will actually bring an income. That's financial planning in its core. Mm-hmm. And then on the right-hand side, you need to understand, you need to measure it. So I was speaking to this one friend of mine, and he was speaking and he said, you need money to make money. And he's a spiritual man, and he was walking and praying and said, Lord, you need money to make money. I'm down and out. And the Lord said to him, he says, now this is him speaking to me. He says, the Lord says, do you have 1 rand? And he says, I don't believe it. In my gene, that day there was 1 rand. He says, yes, Lord, I've got 1 rand. And he says, now take this, go and buy something and sell it for 2 rand. Then you take the 2 rand and you go buy something and you sell it for 4 rand. And you continue, and you'll suddenly see that you'll be in the seat of having 1 million rand. I think it was 20 cycles. No? So he started that, and I remember seeing him with a bag like this in his pocket, and he says it's now 16,400 and whatever rand. He says, well done, but so you are making. So he called it 1 to 1 million. So the reality is you need to have a measure stick, how you can measure your progress in terms of what you have to build up to deliver some income for you. All right. So I wanted to just touch on this. Savings versus investments, the difference in purpose. I think, we've got a lot of people saving. If they are saving, I think the stats is against us, but if they are saving like through stuff like stokvels. They're saving through their money market. I've got a lot of cash there, 3 months, 6 months, or 3 years, doesn't matter how much, but on the money market. And then lastly, you get these banks app, saving pockets. I'm saving. But the purpose of that is basically consumption, and it creates good feelings and a wealth of memories. That's what the saving side of it. The difference between savings and investments is the following. There's investments are stocks on a JSE, business ownership, buying land, real estate. And the big thing is it's income generating and protecting your capital is the purpose. So it creates assets and a long-term personal wealth strategy. So you need to understand your personal economy requires much more capital consumption over time than consumption expenditure. So you need to get in a place where, I mean, this new credit NCR law of ours is actually very wise. Because the bottom line is you will only get a bond if you have excess cash flow. Now, this is the way that the personal economy works. The banks were just very clever in applying it, or actually being forced to apply it now. But the reality is you need to think, will I be saving for something or will I be investing? Now, if you save for a car, it takes much longer, but the reality is you'll have a very nice experience with that second-hand bucky, you know, instead of going buying that new one. But when you start investing, you must understand that unless you do something that you invest into that will create a capital base in nature so that you can have income coming from it, you are actually just saving. So that's what I wanted to just touch on. And so your first asset, so this is, we were just finishing up with our walk, and I asked a specific question, and this was what we came down to. The first asset in your personal economy is yourself. Now, she's got 4-year, academic qualifications behind her. She's now actually in her second-year articles. She's been working full-time after school and studying part-time. So she's got a lot of experience. She's only 22 years old. So I said to her, okay, you must understand, you need to produce as an asset. Your ability to produce value to others, create the opportunity to generate income for personal consumption and investment. Now, how many young ones do you find that think about how can I start investing when they get their first paycheck? I tell you now, for the first 5 years, they were just after matric. All 3 of my girls, they were working full-time and studying part-time. We just made the choice not to start spending money on them again because they were buying stuff like you can't. I mean, there was no thinking about investment, not even saving. Saving is saving money where you buy something at a special. That was it. So I had to start speaking to them about, because now they need to start shifting in their mind. I mean, they're clever girls, but I mean, consumption is much nicer. It feels good now, but you need to start looking into the future. So the question that I've asked her, do you realize how much you are worth? I mean, if you look at SARS and you do a calculation, they've put a value on you. Did you know that? You are very valuable to this country. So I ask her, so how much are you worth?
More than what you want to be.
so I ask her, how much are you worth? She says, I have no idea. I says, well, how much do we need to invest as a capital amount to give you your income per annum? She says, I don't know. I says, well, let's do it roughly. Very aggressive investment plan. We take your income, we times it by 10, and let's say it's 200,000. It's a bit less. Article clerks are not getting that much. But let's round it up for 200,000 times 10. So that means you are worth 2 million. So did you realize that you are worth 2 million? And we're still paying off on that bond. But that study loan, I wanted to say. So the reality is you are an income producing asset. And you must realize it. You are actually very valuable. And you're just starting out. So what I realized in South Africa is not everyone is taking this path of being their own, of taking ownership of their ability to be an asset to someone else that seriously. And you want to be in property. If you don't look after yourself and your personal economy, you will never get into property, or very slowly. Let me rather put, if you've got a bad credit record, we can help you, but it will take some time. So in your personal economy, it is to make sure that you apply your ability as a capital asset by creating more income producing assets outside of your personal income. All right? So when you get past the saving mentality into the investing mentality, the first step is I will use my ability to convince someone to give me some money because I can invest into a capital asset that will produce an income. So I find a lot of people wants to get into property as a sector, but they actually are not looking after themselves. And so whenever you are young, whenever you are older, it doesn't matter. The same principles apply. Get into your budget, start getting the positive cash flows out, restructure your life so that you are able to get and duplicate. And it really starts with this. I was speaking to a gentleman, just quickly. He said to me yesterday, by the end of the year, we will have between the three of us about 30 flats. Says, what? Yes, in 7 years, we'll have 100 flats. And I says, but just the other day, you said you had about 3 flats and it took you 11 years to get there. He says, yes, but it's coming, that effect, that compounding effect that we're going into now is starting to kick in. And they will have, in today's terms, R1 million income in 7 years per month out of the 100 flats. And just understanding that it is a long game. And that picture that you see there, you start with 1, you go into the next 2, and the next 2, then you've got 3, in other words, will generate another 4, and suddenly that effect will come in that Daniel will be referring to. All right, so that's not me.
That's me.
Oh, that's Daniel. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Gerhard. And so I think very important point. Just want to say to the audience there, both here live and obviously virtually, got a lot of questions coming. I could see a lot of people responding certainly to Chris. You're going to have some quite tight questions to ask over here. So please continue to send those questions through. If you got anything for Gerhard, we certainly will be dealing with them in the next session. Okay, over to you, Daniel, and you're going to talk about the cash multiplier, how to turn into a cash.
Well, actually, exactly what Gerhard was speaking about, trying to. I think we all. Thank you, Neil. I think we all grew up in, and it's really mind blowing. I've been in this business for much longer in the distressed property market than about 40 years. So, but in this specific market for 12 years, doing exactly this. And what I could not ever understand is a very simple question. If you can actually, if you know upfront, Gerhard, you're going to buy stocks, no? Let's just use any example. And you know for a fact that if you buy that stock, you're going to have a predetermined return. Then you have another stock, which you're not so sure about what you're going to end up with because it's very volatile, it's very market related. And which one will you actually choose?
Bitcoin.
Well, that just gives you the unfortunate answer. If it was like that, okay, then most people would not invest in buy-to-let today. Okay, that's the problem. We find that even after we have got the full track record for the last 12 years, people think that buying and keeping a property is the best way to make money. Okay. And unfortunately, just like my dad taught me, he was actually wrong. It's the second best one. Okay. So, and I think that's very important for tonight's. I'm going to try and in 5 minutes, try to give you enough information to actually make the mind shift. That buying to keep is not your answer. I know you like to hold on to those things and you want to keep it because you think if you keep it now, it's okay. It's going to be great in the future. Yes, it's going to be good. But as I always say, good is the enemy of great. Okay. So the purpose here is to help us to achieve this asset building in a quicker way by using compound real estate investment. Okay. And that is the difference. What is different from what we do comparing to any other, if I can call it, buy to let or other property? Same transaction, you're going to own a property. The only difference is you're probably going to only keep it for 2 years maximum, then get your returns out, and then things change. Okay. So if you look at our history over the last 12 years, gives you an idea. And I actually did a stress test with Erwin Roeder from 1972 to 2018. I wish I did it a bit later because then I can include COVID so I can prove that we actually did that. But if you can look at our returns there over the term, you'll see that we actually did greater in that term than even in some of the years prior to that. And in this case, if we look at that and we say at the worst time of our property market, returns-wise, so forth, negative influences like, and most people don't actually know it, but the worst was in 1994 when the government changed. Everybody thought that we're going to run all in the sea and run away. I don't know what they thought, but that was the case at that stage. Everybody sold their properties and wanted to run away. And that was the worst drop. But the recovery was in 10 quarters, which is only 2.5 years. And then it excelled by percentages which we've never experienced after that to rectify it. So our property market is seriously strong, and it's proven that in that time. And if you look at those type of figures, we have never had, even the drop at that stage was 11% in our price average countrywide at that stage. And even with that, you would have still had your capital and your returns. The only people who would have sacrificed a bit would have been, in our case, Wealth Assist, who would have sacrificed a very small portion of their profits in the case because we get a performance profits only after the returns has been earned by the real estate owner. So how do you get it right? How do you get to that? And I think this is the key. Hopefully I can help you today to make that final mind shift by looking at you buying at 75% of market value comparing to 105%. And there I've worked on a transaction where you actually bought at 95% of market value plus transfer cost. Okay. In our case, our transaction values to a maximum of 75% always includes the transfer duty and whatever that may be. Then the next one is your annual returns. Now, I'll get to, is it too good to be true type of thing? Because that's always the big question. So there you'll see you've got a 14% on a net yield return where on your properties, and this is actually flattering the buy-to-let system at the moment because it's actually less than that. And then if you look at your capital growth, 5%, and you look at the difference between these various returns over comparing capital growth of 1.1 million to 628,000 over a 10-year period, we're talking about 2.9 million rental income comparing to your 821, and that's a good buy to let. Okay, so how do we actually get it right, and what is it actually? Where's the difference coming in? And as you'll see there, your net yield, and it's not because of none other reason apart from the fact that you buy at lower than market value, brings you to the point where you actually earn a net yield of 18.75% and after cost at about 17 net yield per annum. Okay. And this is consistently every year for, doesn't matter which cycles we went through over the last period of time. It went through COVID, various other things. And the key additional to that is obviously any changes or potential changes which you may have in interest rate hikes. We all know when we all bought at 7% and it went to 11 or 12 or what, 12 point, what was, where did we turn? So 11.75 turned. I mean, we talk about 4 and 5% where a lot of people started losing their investment properties again, which in our case, if there was any change, rates and taxes, levies, maintenance costs, all those type of things, our product already includes that. That means that if there's an escalation in that value, you will automatically get the tenant will pay that and not you, which is not actually seen in the industry at all. Now, people think, how is that possible? Is it, let's get to the too good to be true type of thing. I think before that, just look at those figures. And I think it's important to look at, if you look at your returns, there on the end of the day, your net yield after 10 years. Now, this brings you back to your figures. You want to get a passive income. That's what most people invest in property for, is for passive income in the future. Now, here you end up after 10 years with 3.9 million rand profit for the same investment in the beginning of the 10 years, where the other person with a buy-to-let ends up at a profit of 1.6 million. It is literally more than double, all right, which enables you, obviously, to make sure that your returns on the end of the day is in such high volumes that it can give you a rental return. Now, even if you want to, at some stage, just own it, it's okay. I understand it. There's some day that you want to decide that I don't want to make so much money anymore. It's okay. I'm just going to be happy with buying a few buy-to-lets. And now I want to sit with it and just run it. You know, maybe you want to buy a block of flats. It's just easier to manage and whatever you want to do. Here you end up, after 10 years, just take your money and buy that. Okay? At that stage. And if you got the cash, I can guarantee you'll actually got to buy less than market value because you got cash and you can negotiate. Okay. So you'll end up having a 29,000 Rand income per month from R1 million after 10 years, where now, if you kept that buy-to-let product on the end of the day, you would have ended up with 15,000 Rand a month or 60. Okay. So that gives you a good idea of why should you make this mind shift. And that's why I can't understand why would you select a product which will provide you half of the passive income in the future if you can buy something that can double up and end up with the why people think it is too good to be true, because it sounds too good to be true, and then they always say it is too good to be true. Fortunately, we've got a track record for 10 years, and we have some investors in this crowd who's been investing with us for 7, 8 years, some longer, that has been through that cycles, have experienced actually these returns, and then can share that with you. So if you look at this, the key why it looks like that is, and this is a simple sum. If you take your money today and you invest it, you get it out in 2 years with your return, and you reinvest it, because you have to compare the apples with the apples. So if you're sitting with the other property, the only money you get out is your rental income. And I've budgeted that you actually reinvest in that as well and calculated it into the picture. But if you look at the other graph, you'll see the blue one. Every 2 years, we've done this investment. When you got your capital and the returns out, you reinvested it. Okay? It's not magic. I promise you, it's not magic. It's just compound returns. That's what it is. And that's what provides you with this. And then the cherry on the cake is obviously in all our products, we assist real estate owners. And this is the heart of the organization, helping them through this process, making sure that either they can recover and keep their property. So you've got a predetermined buyer, pre-qualified, if he sorts these matters out and work with us, that he can buy back his property. Secondly, you've got, if it's not, you have a property that is substantially less than market value, which you can always collect your returns and make sure that you can make it. And in the same time, to measurable, beneficial social impact in the lives of other people, instead of stealing the house on an auction or somebody else where there's a big shortage that the client have to pay in or destroys life, etc. And that's my story.
Okay, good. Great. Thanks very much, Daniel. Thanks, Gerhard. Once again, to the audience, both virtually and obviously live, please submit your questions. I see we've got quite a few on the expropriation one. I have a few questions of my own for both you, Gerhard, and then Daniel as well. So in the audience, if you do have questions, maybe just, we will call you out now. Maybe you'll just write it down in the meantime, so that we can deal with your question. Somebody will come around with the microphone to give you that opportunity. So once again, please submit your question to the Q&A box down there. All right, so just, I think there's been quite a lot of, I think some people fear that we're saying we are fear-mongering and this kind of thing. So, and I just want to read out, it's actually a statement from one of the people that have logged on. It's Sipiwe, it's Msifo. And so thank you for your question, Sipho. And you mentioned this, and I think it's very important, and this is why I'm reading it out, and to this audience as well. Superior says, thank you for the clarification. It is unfortunate that discussions around the Expropriation of Land Without Compensation Act are often dominated by knee-jerk reactions rather than informed debate. Well, I beg to differ on that. I think it's an ongoing thing, and I'm going to ask a little bit now, when I get to the end of the question. It is an ongoing debate because a lot of it hasn't been tested, and I'll give Chris also that opportunity to answer at the end. A more transparent and public conversation on this matter would be invaluable, allowing citizens to engage with the facts rather than being swayed by misinformation or emotional rhetoric. Well, this thing has been thrown in our face by the government, and we've kind of had to just deal with it. And it was sneaked through Parliament, in fact. And so I just want to just state some of the facts here, Sipiwe. The lack of proper discourse has led to misconceptions that fuel division, when the real focus should be on the opportunities that this country, 100%. And I agree with you on that, Sipiwe. So instead of framing the issue through fear or political agendas, the conversation should center on how best to ensure equitable land distribution while safeguarding economic stability and national prosperity. I think well said. I think absolutely. And let me tell you, Sipiwe, there's a wonderful program. It's called the KaiLand program. It's run by the Free Market Foundation, and they've already put 16,000 people, giving them title in their hands. You know, if government had to run that initiative with government land that they could hand over to people, we could turn this economy around overnight. And so I think, thank you for that comment. There's another piece at the end: open and constructive dialogue can help bridge of the differing perspectives, fostering a shared vision for sustainable development rather than deepening division. Absolutely. So thank you for that. We really appreciate it. I think you've added to the conversation today. Great. So I don't even want to add to one of it. You're well put. I think that's all we can say.
I don't think I can be more eloquent than Sipiwe has been.
Yeah.
Maybe I can add that, look, I get the feeling that this topic gets hijacked and it gets leveraged by various parties that has a specific purpose in mind, you know, whatever that may be.
Exactly.
And then get riled up, and there's this hysteria around it. And the only way I could get past that. I mean, even my wife, she's on social media and she was very worried and said, look, I'm going to actually read the act and see what it's about. And then I relaxed.
Absolutely. So now the first question that came in was quite interesting. It came from Amanda Dippenard. She said, what happens if I owe a small amount of my property? So yes, the whole concerns now. But the market value is 50 times more. Would they then pay it off, the 200,000 I owe and not the 5 million market value? So there's somebody who's already sort of asking the question. I don't know if you want to add to that in terms of what it would be, but you would test it in the courts, right?
So, and hopefully before it gets there, the guidelines will be given in terms of the regulation that's going to be promulgated in terms of the act. So, and look, there's a line that runs through it. just and equitable. So no, it will not be just and equitable to pay 200,000 for 50 million property. So
Yes.
it cannot stand at least a court intervention. So I mean, that's an absurd scenario, but it's a valid concern that regarding market value of a property.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for that. Okay, so Gerhard, and I liked your presentation because I think it really, because you know, people work all their life, you put in that production, because what we want is a productive economy. And if you're earning more money, you put it into investments like property, and which grows every year. And we just need to look at the house price index just to look at it, how house prices have grown. I mean, that's just the basic thing. But my question is more because you're saying invest in yourself and that, and there's a lot of people that get it wrong. And the reason is, I have a feeling, and my surmise is that we have a very strong selling housing culture here. In other words, lots of people on the sales side of the transaction selling property, but it might not be the best property. Mm-hmm. So now you're dealing with a lot of people who have got themselves, overextended themselves. They come to you. Gerhard, how are we going to do that now with somebody that's maybe a negative $5,000 a month, and they come to you and say, Gerhard, please help, what do I do? How would you handle that?
Well, I think, that's what we do daily. And the reality is, if you look at 90% of the issues, it's got something to do with debt. So I think one of the key strategies is to acknowledge that and see how you can get out of it. And there's different pathways. I mean, and I think just the personal story, when I was 30 years old, I made a couple of choices, not linked to debt, but to employment. And without knowing it, very soon I had to consider selling my property, which was, looking back, in fact, it was most likely the biggest financial mistake I could have done. And the reason why I did it was because I was afraid that I couldn't pay the bond. Now, looking at what the Assist Group is offering, where were they? You understand? Because the solution of getting an outside opinion, knowledgeable inputs in terms of your property, knowledgeable input in terms of your debt management, and then just plain financial sense, looking at the bigger picture and bringing people, even investors, and that's what I actually realized in hindsight. If I just knew a bit that what I knew now, I would have brought someone in and said, listen, let's do some numbers, but let's save the property, because the asset will actually outrun us. And I think we can definitely look at someone and say how you can convert it, and buying time. I think that's the other thing. Just buying breathing space for a while for you to actually be able to recover would have been the answer for me personally as well at that age. And I think the wisdom around the table and the model on the table is actually the solution to get you safe and show that you don't have to lose all.
Wonderful.
Change your habits.
So Daniel, I mean, you were talking about the different markets. I mean, we had I think it was 97, mid-July, 97 or 98, 25.5%, I think was the high.
That's right. Yeah.
And it all turned around, I think, 2000.
Not credit card, Dave. Mortgage.
No, mortgage. Yeah, that was the interest rate on mortgage. 25.5%.
Yeah.
So can you imagine that, today we're sitting at 11.
Yeah.
We've had 3 interest rate cuts, and we thought they're going to be a lot more aggressive. And I pick up and I talk to a lot of people in the industry, and they're telling me that our sales are not going that well.
That's true.
And the reason is because we get these markets that come to us, and it goes up and it goes down. It goes up and it goes down. And so, question to you is, we've had that one, we had 9, and then it turned around. We had this fantastic boom from 2002 to 2007. And of course, then we had the financial crash. The global financial crisis hits us in 2008 and 9. And then, of course, 10 years later, we had COVID. So it doesn't stop. So somebody, so the protection mechanism, somebody sitting over there, because on one side, somebody gets in a distress situation, they're going to lose their house. So maybe let's revisit that model, because it's important in terms of the impact investment offering that you described.
So the question,
Well, so
how is it possible that through that time, that's what you're asking, through that time, how is it possible that even if the guy was in trouble, how did he get out of it? Was that
well, they're coming to you.
Yeah.
So they're saying, Daniel, this is the scenario that I've got, and you can blame whatever it is, whether it's economy or whether it's just mismanagement of your property, which in many cases it is. It's decisions that you've made yourself and the debt that you've landed in yourself. And they come to you, and now we need to sell. And in fact, the auctioneer is knocking on the door. What do I do, Daniel?
as the owner?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So it's, I think we've got so many, I think the model that we have designed, if I can call it that, it's purely not, it was not, I just want to say I'm not that smart. I think I'm smart sometimes, but I'm not that smart to work it out. This was really given to us. And I think the model works in such a way that your property, when we started off with a 75% buying at 75% of market value, I just thought that would build enough equity into the transaction that protects you. So should something go wrong, whatever, eventually we realized that 75% is far more miraculous figure than I could ever work out. Okay, for all various reasons. And if the owner comes to us, we would first of all do a proper due diligence, making sure that we are easy recoverable. That's number one. Okay. Why would you help somebody that's going to be very upset when he loses his house in 2 years if he can't repurchase his home? Okay, so that's number one, and we make sure of that. Secondly, we make sure if he can't recover, in that case, because a lot of people are not able to recover due to the fact that they haven't got a stable job, current income, that type of thing. We make sure of all those things up front. In actual fact, Mardi, who doesn't want me to put her on the spot here tonight, will tell you that every client, okay, she's a mortgage originator, so she takes every client, pre-qualify him up front, with taking the facts in consideration, that the property is now, the debts is now paid, or whatever the client's challenge was, it was addressed, and will they now be able to recover within this year or 2 years or whatever the timeline is. And they give us an upfront qualification of what needs to take place, what needs to change on that, so that. And if it is not possible, we're not going to guide you as the real estate owner to tell you, okay, we're going to do a recovery product or one of our buy and lease back products, because it's not executable. But we will tell you that we'll stop the legal action, we'll stop the auction, we'll help you sell this property, maximize what you should get out, and have a fresh start at least. Okay. So I think that is the key of this. And remember that we as a company, and I'm talking now from Turning Point Property Group as an investment company, as well as for every investor here, we always make sure that our performance profits, we only earn after. So we really put our money where our mouth is. When we sit on that risk committee and making those decisions, we make sure that the money that you're going to make, you have to, they take mine first before they take yours. So we look after it. We make sure that they are protected in the process.
Excellent.
I hope it.
Yes, no, absolutely. I think so. So, Chris, another one for you. Incido, Machaya, how is the market shaken up by the Act so far? Did it cause slow buying in the market, or is the market behaving as normal? Is it the perfect time to sell in terms of price? Or is it the best time to buy? Will you get better opportunities to reduce the price of the property? I want to sell my property. I'm not willing to sell it below its market value.
Geez, was it Incido?
Yes.
I asked a hard question.
Yeah.
So firstly, let me just put the disclaimer out there. I think this is more a question for economists. So as a conveyancer, I can maybe answer that from a personal perspective. I'm a conveyancer, so my profession is closely linked and related to general market conditions. I haven't seen any, say for all the hysteria in the media and around price fires and stuff like that. I haven't seen any slowdown in the amounts of bonds that the banks are giving or property transactions. But also remember, we're living in the Western Cape.
Yeah.
It's a very, very unique little biosphere that we've got going there. It's not really comparable to the rest of the country. But I haven't seen personally, and in actual fact, since the interest rate has started to come down a bit, I get an uptick in instructions, which is good.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks for that. Okay, so I want to bring you into Gerhard. What are some of the steps you'd advise one goes about when they're starting out as a property investor, and some of the things to be on the lookout for? And maybe, Daniel, you can also add to that as well. Are you happy?
No, I've got the answer. Just relook at the webinar when we send the link. So, no, I think it's very simple. Make sure that you manage your money well. Stay away from debt as far as possible. Save up money so that you have cash available to start investing. It actually costs money to invest. That guy had it right. If you want to get into property mostly, and even if you can get without any cash into property with us, it's always the money that you would have paid in is actually, in terms of returns, very well spent. So there's no doubt. I think building that profile, speaking about Madri again, Madri, speaking to her, say, listen, how do I start this process? What do I need to get ready for you so that I can start investing? It is not, especially, someone working for a fixed salary, it's something different. If you're saying to me that you are working for yourself and you want to get into property, then it is actually slightly different. But the thing is, if you plan for it and you're ready for it, you will definitely be able to get in. And I think getting the right financial people around you will be the biggest advantage for you.
Okay, great. It's another one for you, Chris. It's from Adrian Niemand. I'm not sure if this was addressed. I think it was, Adrian. But anyway, what would happen to the bondholder, bank, or private investor in the instance of expropriation? Will the state pay the outstanding balance? Good question, Adrian.
Again, good question. But I touched on it. One of the headings was specifically dealing with mortgagees. So yes, again, the Expropriation Act expressly in the Act recognizes the rights of mortgagees, and also it cannot be expropriated without compensation. Let's get that out of the way again. And it again stipulates that the payment must be just and equitable, and the compensation is payable to the mortgagee. So just and equitable, I think we did touch on it, but I cannot foresee a scenario where just and equitable will mean that a mortgagee has to take a bath, and write off a certain portion of capital and interest or cost. So, I mean, again, the knock-on effect to the economy will be severe and substantial.
Absolutely.
Support that.
Okay, I think this one's for you, Daniel. Is there a market to buy to lease back for a multi-rental property?
Yes, there is. We constantly get opportunities. Like, for instance, we just done, I think if you go on our website tonight, you'll see there's one that's got 12 different properties in it. It's one block, that type of thing. But we have obviously separated it so that we can give more people opportunities. But you could have taken up all 12, if that answers the question.
Yeah.
And we get that type of thing on a regular basis.
Okay, we got an interesting question here, which is also for you, Chris, for Maria Reika. The definition of property in the Ex-Prop Act, does it include movable property?
Yes. Long answer, a short answer, yes. but not for no compensation. That's expressly limited to land. So yes.
Okay, absolutely. Well, there's your answer, Maria. Okay, to our live audience here, are there any questions? Would you just raise your hand? And of course, Christoph will come around. Don't be shy. We've got a question over here. The gentleman there in the red jacket.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for such an informative session. I so wish that we would have these conversations in Parliament. There is so much knowledge that you guys have that our people out there do not have. People out there do not know these things that you're talking about. Just want to make 2 comments before I pass a question to Chris. I want to say that before they come and repossess your property, the first thing that you need to do is you need to quickly run and find Daniel. Where you must run for your life, find Daniel. I'm telling you, he will help you rescue your property with the opportunity, as he has mentioned, to buy it back in 2 years' time if affordability is in place. The other thing that I'll mention is that one must never make the mistake of allowing the bank to repossess their property. You will be in more trouble, not only now, but in the time to come as well, because no bank will ever trust you enough to give you a bond if one bank has repossessed your property. You will be flagged forever. Sure. That is when you should find Daniel wherever he is. If this door is locked, sit outside until they open the door. They have programs where they will rehabilitate you so that you're in good standing and then you're able to buy a property again.
Yes.
Now, my question to you, Chris, is over the years, we've seen some political leaders who tell people to illegally occupy land, to illegally occupy people's properties. And we do know and acknowledge the fact that evicting someone from your property is very expensive.
And lengthy
as well. So in the process, you're spending a lot of money. Those people are not spending money. They're in your property and most likely vandalizing your property. What measures are there that our government has to protect investors? Because investors are scared. If you have got a person with such a high following saying to people, occupy land, and the government says nothing, they keep quiet. Yes, you're saying that the minister has assured us that that will not happen. And you also did mention that ministers do change over time. So this minister is saying this now, but there are political leaders who are telling people, occupy land. What measures are there to protect investors from that scare? Thank you.
This extremely interesting question. So the Expropriation Act, obviously, we would need to look at the answer outside of the current Expropriation Act, because this is a scenario that has happened prior to the Expropriation Act or the enactment of the Expropriation Act, and it's illegal. So what they are doing is illegal. The Constitution protects our property rights, as do certain other legislation. For example, the Eviction Act. So there's no real protection or no magic bullet. Let me put it differently. There's no magic bullet to protect you against a scenario like that. The only protection you have is, unfortunately, the courts. You've touched on the length of the process and the amount of money you have to spend, and that is an unfortunate reality. There's no magic bullet. I mean, if people get incited to occupy your land, it's going to be a drama to get them out, and you have to avail yourself to the court, unfortunately.
Right, thank you. Are there any other questions over here?
Yes, I just want to say, and I have actually physically experienced some of these things which you're talking about, where we have got a piece of land and the guys came onto the land. The law again is there to protect us, and there is other organizations which I think the one is it Roemira? What is it called? Roemira? Yeah, something like that. They came onto our land and they cleaned the land up within literally 3.5 hours. Okay, so there is ways.
and the right ways. It's not people that do it illegally. They do it actually all legally. Okay. But they got the right access, go to the right places, ask the right questions. And therefore, I'm not saying don't follow the court, but sometimes negotiations far better than going through the lengthy process of the court.
Okay, thank you for that. There's a question at the back there. Can we just the mic? Yeah. Just looking for a mic here.
So I have a statement to make and a question to ask. So what I find very interesting, which you didn't spend a lot of time around tonight, Daniel, is that I am a long-term investor with Daniel. So just, I think before this, we sat down, and at the moment in the last stint of investment, so I've known him over 30 years and we've done lots of investment, but in the last 2.5 years for myself, just to mention to those listening out there, if you're thinking it's too good to be true, right? Daniel, the amount of money I gave him in the last 2.5 years, we just sat down right before this meeting and he had more than doubled that for me, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing I'd say is what I do in the world is about how do we as a society really not only look at ourselves, because I think South Africa and a lot of other places around the world is an example of if you only take care of yourself, as in your investment. So I am very ashamed to say that initially when we started out this, Daniel, that's what we did. We bought properties on auctions and we took care of ourselves. And as we grew up and we started realizing, now you start having encroaching coming on your environment because you are, yes, creating your nice little picket fence and your nice little thing. But other human beings, if they're not going to have this, what's going to happen? They're going to start taking, right? They're going to, because they don't have. And so again, back to Daniel's product of the social impact that he's obviously baked into this whole process is that you're able to go to sleep very nicely at night because yes, you are making a profit, but you're also thinking about the human beings that are struggling. And as I think it was Neil said, it was not just also misappropriation of your funds, but very often circumstances that really put you in a position where you cannot. And the other thing which you didn't mention, Daniel, which is maybe what my question then is maybe to mention some of the impacts that happens when that happens to a family. And then how that impacts on society and why it is incumbent upon us not just to make money for ourselves, but to actually, because inadvertently you're actually taking care of yourself. But because you're not just a self, you're also a collective. And so recently I returned from India and lived in these very beautiful places. And the moment you put your toe out of there, I'm sorry to say it, but it's crap. Because they're only taking care of their personal needs and their collective needs are going, well, I'm not going to use the very nice word I would use, but I'm going to say that. So that is an example for us of why, if you want a better South Africa, you better not only look after your own needs, but also the needs of your collective community.
Right. So thank you. Great. I'm prepared to take one more question before I ask the team just to wrap up. Is there anybody else who's got a burning question? Anybody? Very cheap round. Okay. So first, Gerhard, can you give us your final wrap? I'll give you a minute and a half maybe just to do a wrap up. Give some advice, leave people something that they could go away with and apply in their investment lives.
Thank you, Neil. So getting back to the gentleman whose aim is to actually have 100 flats in 7 years, he said, if I make a mistake, oh well, then it means the whole South African economy is down the tubes. So, and he looked away and he continued, stating to me that, I think if there's one thing that is sure in South Africa, we are definitely the top 4 economies in Africa. Our infrastructure is to the extent that we can really trust it. And I was speaking to Chris last week, and I said to him, just understanding the property laws of South Africa, the security it brings, the fact that all these major laws are actually protecting our property rights. And even spending so much time in terms of this law that came out now, looking at a percentage of total turnover in property transfers in the next couple of years, I'm sure that we will not even touch on 0.5%. So there's no doubt property is a solution. It's the only solution that naturally brings capital growth and income streams. You just need to get into it and understand it, and that's where we are specializing in.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Gerhard van der Westhuizen. Chris, do you want to give your final parting shots? Yeah.
So if there's one message, look, I didn't come here to convey any messages, just to unpack the act, but there is one message I can convey is people should relax. We've got a very robust legal system. We've got a great constitution. We've got good courts. I'm talking about a personal experience. I'm a property owner. I have investment property, and I'm not selling up. I mean, it's just only going one way. So people shouldn't get caught up in the hype. And of course, people do that for whatever nefarious reasons. And yeah, relax.
Wonderful. Great. It's Chris Nel, litigator from BDP Attorneys, conveyancer as well, heading up conveyancing department, not only litigator. You're also on the helping side as well. So Daniel, you got the last word, your final parting shots for our audience out there. I don't know how many million are still out there, but
I think Neil, I think the bottom line is if we can look at the history of the last from 1972 up till today on property growth, there's ever only been twice in that whole term where we had negative property growth. And if we look at that and we look at the average, although our last 4 years on normal buy-to-let is reasonably low, it is always in time rectified itself. It's proven itself. We have a shortage, a huge shortage in property. And that's why the property market will stay alive and vibrant and growing until we have provided housing for everybody, which will still take a very long time. Okay. So, and as long as that happens, you can have proper capital growth. All advice that I want to give you today is don't be happy with half of the money that you can make in 10 years if you can double up with no less risk. No more risk. Okay. So consider that. Make the mind shift, guys. Make the mind shift. Don't buy to keep. Buy to make compound returns. And that will escalate your plan, whatever your plan is and how you want to get there. That will change it forever. Okay. Thank you.
Great stuff. So Daniel Lombard is founder of Wealth Assist. I want to thank you, our audience online, for joining us this evening. Hopefully you've walked away with some real great insight. This is a conversation I'm sure that we're going to continue with. It's not the first time we discussed it, and it's certainly we will be discussing it in future as well. Property investment, we discuss all the time. And that's where we focus on. It will be here forever. To our live audience, thank you very much for joining us. I think you've been fantastic. Your input and until next time, I think we're back on I think it's in the first week of May again. That's our next session. So I encourage you to join, ourselves with the Wealth Assist group. And we're ready now, the 20.
Where are we?
Well, to probably be here, we're either Pretoria or Cape Town. Okay. We'll have to just confirm where it's going to be, but we are coming to a city near you. So please, watch us online. Go onto the rei.co.za website. You can also see this replay also on the Wealth Assist website, also be on our website as well. But it's wonderful having you today. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't forget, join us on Thursday, 12 o'clock. We're back to our normal slot for our webinar. Just go to rei.co, register over there. We're talking about residential rentals and brand new strategies for residential rentals. So alongside, there are many strategies. You've got to do it, and we're trying to get you into real estate, guys. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, everybody. Until next time, this is Neil Peterson along with the WealthSys team and Chris Nel, attorney.
Cheers.
Until next time. Cheers, everybody. Cheerio.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.